Hi, my name is Philip Morley, and I just want to talk a little bit about resawing. So obviously I have a power feeder on my saw now that works fantastic, but before I had this, I just did it by hand. Now, the blade I have is nothing fancy. It's a Timberwolf blade, 3 teeth per inch, and it works okay. Now, this blade is pretty much at the end of its life, so it's kind of a little bit dull. I'm just going to keep using it until it breaks or it's just not cutting anymore. So what I wanted to point out was anytime I'm doing resawing, I've got this blank, I've joined one face. I haven't really messed with an edge at all, but what I'm going to do first is I'm going to draw a little triangle on the end so that way I can keep it in sequence. Now, when I do this cut, I'm going to do one pass through, and this is something I don't see a lot of people talk about, but once you do that one cut, then I'm going to rotate this, do the next cut, rotate it, do the next cut. What that's going to do is by the time you get to the end of this piece, you won't have this wedge shape. Because if your fence is just off, minuscule amount, it combines, and so by the time you get to the end, you end up with something that might be a 16th at one end and 3/16 at the other, depending on how bad your bandsaw is set up. But no matter what, even when I try to set it up perfectly square, it always does that. So this is just a good method that I've found that works really, really well, and typically it gets me one extra piece of veneer. So give it a go. So this was the last piece of veneer, and I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's running parallel. These two faces are running perfectly parallel to each other. If I didn't do the flip as I was doing that, it would end up in a wedge shape, and typically this would just be a waste piece. So this will give me my last piece. I'm aiming for an 1/8 inch. 3/32 will be the final, and then for my chop saw. So this is the end result. So that's why you do the triangle. And that got me out of 8/4 material. That got me 10 slices that I will then send through my wide belt sander. Before I had that, I would go through a planer and then end up with this. So 3/32 veneer, which I use for my case piece when I do my lumber core. So as an example of what I use that veneer for. Hope that was helpful. So I just wanted to point out a couple of things that might be helpful to people that are starting out bandsawing. So again, I have a power feeder, and it is quite an investment. But for those who want to know about this, it's a Comatic power feeder. This is a 220, and it's their smaller size. It does pretty good with what I do. So most of my stuff is around 4 1/4 to 5 1/4 inch wide. It handles that pretty well. Depending on what wood it is, hard maple, it will have a harder time with. So they have versions that are huge, cost a lot more money, in a 3-phase, so that just wasn't practical for me. So this really helps out me and my wrists and my shoulders from doing this for years by hand. But before this, I would just use a simple grout flow. And this is the red one, just a Home Depot or Lowe's. It works really, really well. It grabs all of that wood well. And the secret of good resawing is obviously you got to set your bandsaw up well. Again, I find a 3-tooth per inch blade works well. This is just a steel blade. I think they have, like a wood slicer is meant to make a really nice blade, and a carbon tip blade might be something I might invest in too. But this is just a Timberwolf blade, and Lennox. I've used a lot of Lennox blades too. But it's about consistent pressure and speed rate, which gets hard to do when it's a long piece because every time you stop and start, that blade wants to fluctuate, and that's where you get up. Now you'll notice I'm not going back to the joiner. The only time I'm going to go back to the joiner is if I start getting off on it. So when I did this by hand, I might be able to do 6 cuts, and every now and then I'm getting away from that cut. I would have to go back, kiss on the joiner. There's no need for me to go back and forth. I get a very consistent cut off the bandsaw. Now, before the Powermatic wire belt sander, I would do this on a planer. If you have a helical head, it works better. Rubber rollers work better. I would put a sacrificial bed, piece of melamine, to kind of raise up that bed because a lot of planers won't go down to 3/32, and it just helps. And as I pass the pieces through, I would start it, raise up the front end of it, or the back end of it, I guess, going through, and then as it goes through, I'll raise up the front end as it goes through the planer, and that just helps from kind of lifting up by the blades and getting kind of away from destroying a piece of the net. So those are just a few things I wanted to point out. Again, this works really, really well for what I'm doing, but it costs more than my bandsaw. So, and again, this is not a fancy bandsaw either. So hopefully those few little tips help. Try the flip-flopping. That really, really does help and gets you a better yield. All right, thanks.